Hey guys, so this is probably gonna be the most complicated build to set up that you can imagine in Path of Exile. And this is gonna be pretty difficult to explain, so this is probably gonna be a longer video. But I'm gonna try my best to explain how word loop works and why it's good and everything about it. However, the build that I chose to do was purely for like an idea, because I would not recommend to do this specific build, but you can take this video as an example of how to set up the word loop. But I would not recommend to play minion instability with this. I just had an idea. It would be fun to just walk and then automatically summon raging spirits, which then would chase enemies and just boom, explode. I also added zombies. I also have absolution on cast when damage taken. Zombies and SRS have minion instability, and absolution is to apply feeding frenzy essentially. Now about the word, the main thing, oh my god, the main thing is Olroth's resolve flask. I'm gonna try to explain it like in a simple terms and then later expand a bit more. Essentially what you need to do, make this flask permanent, like automatically reuse it and have 100% uptime. I'm gonna explain how to do that later. And then the next thing is you need to set up the loop for casting damage taken. So at least one Heartbound Loop ring is required. You don't need to use two, but at least one. And then you need, by the way, in advance, this is an expensive build to even begin. You need at least 15 exalts to begin this build. You can do it with like 10 exalts, especially if you craft your own word items, but I would not recommend to do below 15 exalts. Now, back to the second part. To set up this loot, you need a couple of things actually. But you basically need to make your skeleton duration be equal to cast when damage taken cooldown. By default, cast when damage taken has 250 milliseconds cooldown, and skeletons need to last basically for also that amount of time. So basically skeletons get summoned and then resummoned in the same like sequence, in the same rotation, and cast when damage taken keeps summoning new skeletons. It expires in 250 milliseconds and triggers its own basically. Now the way to do that, there are a couple of ways, and I saw people using like different methods, and I'm not sure how the different method exactly is set up. I tried it briefly, but I did not have something and it just didn't work. So this whole build needs to be very precisely fine-tuned, or else it won't work. Or you're gonna click the wrong button at the wrong time and you're gonna die. Or you're gonna forget to click the button and the build is gonna stop working. There are so many things that you need to think about in advance, but it's actually sounds only very complicated if you never did it. Once you do it once, then you get the idea how all the pieces work together and it becomes easier to understand. Now also briefly about the word, why the word is good. So the word, essentially I ignore all the damage that is below my ward. I currently have 1740 ward. If enemy hits me for let's say 1000 damage, I don't take any damage into my life. I just absorb it into ward. Normally any damage you take with hits, the ward would break and you would lose all the ward. It doesn't matter how much ward you have, any damage you take, you lose all ward. But with the flask, do not lose ward when you take hits. So essentially I only can die if they do damage more than my life pool plus ward in a single hit essentially. Because with this build, even if I turn on Righteous Fire, I still have 5000 life regen per second and around 2000 mana regen per second. It's not technically regen, it's recoup, because that's another thing. When you take any hit, you would normally lose all the ward, and all the ward lost counts as like the full damage taken. Like let's say you have 1000 ward, the enemy hits you for 1 damage, and that would count as 1001 damage taken, because all the ward that you lost counts towards the full damage taken. And that's why cast when damage taken is like pretty much the only setup that people use with the ward, unbreakable ward. This way you can use high level cast when damage taken by just adding more ward to your build. And in addition to that, all the damage you take also works with the recoup, because normally let's say you take 1000 damage and then you have 20% recoup, so you would recoup 20% of that 1000 damage over 4 seconds. But now you also have ward, so you don't even need to lose HP to get life recoup. So when you actually lose HP, you're gonna quickly recover it. Also sadly, all the clips that you're gonna see in this video are gonna be before I got Mind Over Matter. So I was a lot squishier than I could have been. Like I said, it took quite a lot of min-maxing, and it can still be improved quite a bit more, but if you're doing like a normal spellcaster version, you're gonna have like at least 10 times more damage than this. And this build has like 1.5 million DPS only combined. with my zombies and SRS and a couple conditions on monsters. So it's not really a high damage build, but it does feel tanky until at a certain point when enemies start one-shotting you essentially. You can also work on labyrinth traps. They don't do damage to you because you just out-regen it quickly. I can face tank 2 Shaper beams at the same time as well, and that was before I got Mind Over Matter. I cannot face tank obviously Shaper Slam. I can face tank a lot of things that don't do a lot of damage in a single hit. So this build feels very tanky against smaller hits, or these hits below, let's say, 2000 damage. Okay, to begin this build you can do it at around level 70. That's when you can equip ward items. Ward items usually require level 68 to 70. And you can set the loop before even equipping ward items. But then again, you're not really gonna benefit until you put on the ward and the higher level casting damage taken. So first, how to even set up the loop? What do you need? And I'm gonna include some resources. There's a Reddit thread about the loop, and then you can see this like a shopping list. It's gonna help you figure out how much you need currency. Like this is using like Ice Spear, I believe, so the final result was like 30 exalts to set this up. But if you're just buying the base required items and gems to set up the loop and the ward shenanigans, then you need around 15 exalts. So you can use this as a guide on how to build it. There's also a calculator. I don't have a link to this calculator because I copied it from someone, but these are my current stats. I'm getting over 5000 regen. Now, to begin the ward loop, you need anomalous minion speed, anomalous because it has reduced minion duration, around 3 exalts. Anomalous summon skeletons, around 3 exalts. You need this so that your ward loop would be very consistent. You don't want skeletons to die accidentally at the wrong time. So you do need anomalous summon skeletons. Around 3 exalts, like I said. And then Forbidden Rite, just level 1, because you're gonna need extra damage done to you to get a bit higher level casting damage taken. And then level 6 casting damage taken. You do need level 11 summon skeletons, because at level 11 you start summoning 3 skeletons at the same time instead of 2. The next big point is level 21 summon skeletons. Then you start summoning 4 skeletons, and that's when you can set up the more expensive and more, would say simpler version, but it does require a lot more investment to set it up. Just to recap, to set up the loop you need anomalous minion speed, anomalous summon skeletons level 11, Forbidden Rite level 1, and level 6 casting damage taken. Then you also need 3 unique jewels to dust, and they have to have 20% reduced skeleton duration, another 20% reduced skeleton duration, and 19% skeleton duration. They have to be precisely that much. That is all you need to set up the loop. Which, well, it's like 6 exalts just for 2 jewels. There's also Divergent casting damage taken, I believe, which costs like 40 exalts. I actually didn't even check the price, but people were saying 40x plus. The Divergent casting damage taken requires less damage taken to trigger it, and that helps a lot, but like it's super expensive. Now, how to set up the ward loop or the ward sustain? You need Olroth Resolve at least 26 quality. It needs to be between 40 and 42%. Yes, the flask needs to be between 40 and 42% charges used. And then you're gonna set it up on auto, reuse when the flask effect ends. And then you need to increase the flash duration and to reduce the flash charges used. So the belt needs to have at least 19% reduced flash charges used and ability to craft cooldown recovery rate. The rest doesn't matter. You obviously want resistances. Then, that's not all. What, you thought that's all? Then you need flash duration large cluster jewel. You can start with 2 medium jewels until you get a higher quality on the flask and other shenanigans. That way you can set it up sooner. If you want only 1 medium jewel, you need jewel like this essentially. The large jewel is gonna depend on your build. This one is minion build, so I'm using this. But you basically need to increase the flask effect duration as much as possible. And also fasting helps because increased flash charges gain. And the way we generate flash charges is by being Scion, taking Pathfinder, flash gain 3 charges every 3 seconds. Then Utility Mastery, Flash Mastery, additional 1 charge every 3 seconds, and the Traitor Keystone, which you get by using Balbala Timeless Jewel, Brutal Restrain Balbala. Flash gain 4 charges per empty flash slot every 5 seconds. That's why I do not have more flasks. If if you want more flask, you're gonna have to get more flash duration and possibly increase flash charges gain, because this passive flash generation is boosted by the increased flash charges gained. I believe that should be enough. Well, obviously you're gonna take the flash mastery here and these nodes, and that should be enough to sustain the flash permanently. The bad part is that when you enter through any of the portals that teleport you somewhere else, you may, as you notice, it stops the loop, so you may have to actually reproc the loop. That's another bad part. And when you enter a new zone, do not forget to use flask fast and then start moving and then proc the loop, because if you proc the loop and then use the flask, you're dead. You're just instantly dead. For me this works because I have other minions that get transferred through the zone, so I can just go through the zone and then minions die and reproc the loop automatically. But if you're not playing minion build like me, you're not gonna have that automatically. So for that you also need a weapon like this. You just grab spectral spirits on the weapon swap. You essentially weapon swap. You lose those minions that you get from here, and that triggers the damage, and that triggers the rest of the loop. You may actually need 2 weapons depending on your setup. And also you're probably gonna have to lower the volume in game, because yeah, it's a very loud build. Now just to recap, for the ward you need the flask with the right amount of charges and quality. You need medium cluster jewel for the flask effect duration. You need the mastery for the flask charges gained. You need the Ascendancy Pathfinder. You need the traitor node, and you need the belt with reduced flash charges used. And you want increased cooldown and recovery rate, because without it your skeletons would last 0.231 seconds, while the cooldown on cast when damage taken would be 0.25. So you would be missing, and you need to basically lower the cooldown of cast when damage taken. Once you lower that, I believe any 5% would even work. And the next breakpoint is 20%, I think. I'm not too sure, but you need at least 5% cooldown. You could probably even get it on boots. I'm not too sure if it would work. It may need a bit more than 5%, but you can get on boots implicit the cooldown and recovery rate to lower the cooldown just enough. Right, so that's just the beginning. That's how you set it up. Now, like I said, you need to use cast when damage taken, because you're not gonna do enough damage to yourself with just 1 or 2. Well, actually, no, even with 2 rings, you're not gonna do enough damage to trigger a higher level cast when damage taken. So, Forbidden Rite does damage to you and it hits you. The Dark Pact will not work, it has to be Forbidden Rite. And Forbidden Rite does damage based on your maximum life. 40% of your life and 25% of your energy shield will be done as a hit to you, as a hero's hit damage. So here's another thing that you need to balance. You need to balance the amount of life that you have and the amount of hero's resistance that you have. Because if you have too much hero's res, you don't take enough damage. And if you have too much life and not enough hero's res, then you do too much damage to yourself. And you start seeing the life pool bounce up and down. If that happens, it means that you need more hero's resistance. If you have too much hero's resistance, then you need to get a bit more life. And it just, so many, you see how many moving things that need to be balanced at the same time. If something is not precisely balanced, the build is not gonna work properly, or just straight up you're gonna die. Another thing, I was balancing the flask. I leave the loop like this for a minute. Everything works fine. 1 minute passes, something like 1 minute passes, boom, it breaks. So you need to make sure that it is properly balanced. Like if I were to use quality 20 flask, it would not work. After half a minute or a minute, it would break and I would die. In Hideout I don't die, so it's easy to test in Hideout. But you basically just leave it like this for a couple minutes to see if it breaks or not. Now, as for the items, what you're looking for: gloves with 400 plus ward, boots with 400 plus ward, and helmet with 600 plus ward. You can start with lower values, it doesn't matter, it can definitely be lower at the beginning, but you do want to upgrade as much as possible because there aren't that many ways how to get ward. And to get ward, there are a couple other ways other than boots, helmet and gloves, is the Skin of the Loyal and Skin of the Lords, which does give 100% increased global defense, or there's a rare body armor but very expensive, like 6 exalts minimum with trash stats, which you can get by selling 60 breach rings and hoping to get it, but it's not always, and then recombine it into something better, but it's like for very like min maxes, and that's like very end game setup. Next part is staff mastery. With the staff mastery you can get 30% increased defenses while wielding a staff. So basically these builds need to be using a staff if you want the maximum, the most amount of ward. Another thing you can get on Amulet, the talismans can have global defense, and there is a weapon that gives 8% global defense per white socket, but you're not really gonna be using it. Oh, and to increase your ward even more, like if you check this flask, it has 70% less ward during flask effect. So if I don't have this flask active, I have 3,500 ward. But when I activate the flask, I only have 1.7k ward. You want reduced flask effect. If you have increased flask effect, it's gonna lower your ward even more. So there is one unique jewel that you also want to get, and you can get it from Act 2 quest, the side quest, Survival Secrets. Flask applied to you have 20% reduced effect. That's it. The second line doesn't matter because it's not gonna be active. So those are the conditions that you need and everything that you need to set this up, and I didn't even talk about the build. I'm gonna include pathful building import code. I don't want to mention too much about the build because this is just summon raging spirits with min instability, and then zombies with min instability, and then absolution just to apply feeding frenzy like I said. Oh, you also probably gonna only want to limit yourself to level 17 casting damage taken, because if it's high level casting damage taken, you're not gonna take enough damage. You're not gonna take enough damage and it's gonna stop working. Like if you put in +2 for the armor, the casting damage taken needs to be level 15 because it's end up being level 17. And it can support up to level 67 skill gems. So some Raging Spirits is currently level 19. It requires level 67. I cannot level it anymore without breaking it. If I level it up, it becomes too high level, and casting damage taken will also need to level up, but then I don't do enough damage to myself to proc that casting damage taken. So in order to be able to use level 21 casting damage taken, you kind of need to use level 21 gems. Anomalous, it's a bit different setup, but you can just use 2 Heartbound Loop rings. They don't technically need to be with the physical and heals damage catalyst, because that boosts from 350 physical damage taken on min and death to 420. You cannot have armor. If you play in party and someone has determination, your build stops, because then you get armor, the ward loop breaks. Another thing, if you take Divine Shrine, it makes you immortal, the build stops as well. There are so many map modes that you cannot run. Anything that messes up with the cooldown, bad. Anything that changes your flash charges gain, bad. So like temporal bubbles, if you enter the temporal bubble for a monster, it changes your cooldown. Build stops. So now quickly what I did with this. Casting damage taken level 17 is linked to concentrated effect, awakened fire penetration, minion life, elemental focus, and summon raging spirits. The zombies are linked to, they are phantasmal zombies because that's what makes them degen. They also need to be linked with anomalous infernal legion because they just have barely enough time to degen and pop before we get resummoned. And if we get resummoned, we don't proc minion stability. So they are linked with minion life, combustion, fire penetration, level 17 casting damage taken, and anomalous infernal legion. And another casting damage taken level 17, doesn't need to be 17 but you want higher level, is linked to absolution, which is level 18. I also got an F for zombies because zombies need corpses, and feeding frenzy for absolution because we strike enemies, and feeding frenzy gives like I believe 10% more minion damage, which is also needed for me. And then I have implicit on gloves, inflict fire exposure on hit, increase damage also helps. And then on the boots I have a bit of extra damage, drop scorched ground, I have to run back and forth through enemies to leave the scorching ground for 2 seconds. I have Purity of Elements linked to Eternal Blessing because I need mana. When you start the loop, you start losing a lot of mana. Especially with this because I have so many casting damage taken. I have 2 6-link casting damage taken setups. So see how much mana I start losing. And this is with the fine-tuned build. I have one of my flasks has reduced mana cost of skills during flask effect, and the boots have enchantment. Reduce mana cost of skills if you have been hit recently. Another trick, if you're doing minion stability, which I would not recommend, you can actually catalyst Tavukai Amulet to boost summon raging spirits, take instead of 20% damage of a life to 24% damage, or you can use life catalyst to boost their HP. it's up to you how you play it. But there is a short delay for minion stability when it starts popping. You can actually see zombies appear, and they don't even have time to move, so you basically have to run on top of enemies and leave zombies. And some raging spirits do have enough time to rush to the edge of the screen to the enemies before they pop. I don't have 100% shock chance, which is required because this is Elementalist applying exposure through the gloves, which adds an extra 20% exposure because of this. But I'm also guaranteed to apply shock when I shock. Like, it applies at least 10% shock, but I still don't have good chance to shock. So it would be nice to also get chance to shock somewhere else. And that's why I'm using Absolution as well, because it is partially lightning damage and it also can crit, and when it crits it also shocks. Otherwise, Forbidden Rite doesn't have lightning damage, but you could have flat lightning damage on a jewel with a bit of crit chance, and it probably would be enough that Forbidden Rite would shock. So phew, this is probably gonna be one of my longest videos. I hope I explained this well enough. If you got any questions, let me know in the comments below. But I'm gonna remake it into a proper build, spellcaster build, and gonna test a lot of different spells and showcase how it looks. Like, for example, you just run around and spit out Soul Rend. Soul Rend looks pretty cool, or Blazing Salvo also looks pretty cool, but people mostly use Ice Spear, Freezing Pulse, Volatile Dead. If you use Volatile Dead, you also need Corpses, and if you use Desecrate, it also kills FPS, like a lot. So yeah, that's it for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.